Hi, this is Scott Ware, the publisher and editor of Radiance Magazine, and we have on the interview show on the Xpnsion Network with us today, Dr. Susan Shumsky. Susan, welcome.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here with you today, Scott.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, just your credits alone are amazing. I mean, for 22 years, you were mentored by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the founder of the Transcendental Meditation movement, and who was the guru of the Beatles and Deepak Chopra. And definitely have some questions with you about regarding that. And you are a highly regarded author with bestsellers. And I'm so glad to have you on the show, because today we're going to talk about some of those books behind you, Chakras and Chakra Healing, Third Eye Meditations. But you're saying in the materials for this book that the chakras and our prana can help us to bring us to greater prosperity, success, and blissful well-being. How do we get that out of our chakras?
Well, let's start with the idea of prana.
Okay.
Prana means life force energy. In India, it's called prana. And in China, it's called chi. And in Japan, it's called ki. And prana is what is keeping you alive. It is that substance out of which life is made. In the ancient scriptures of India, in the Upanishads, it is said that when prana is in the body, that is what is defined as life. And when prana leaves the body, that is what is defined as death.
And really what Western doctors call that is just breath, but there's so much more there, right?
Yes, because prana is not only in the breath, it's also in the sunlight, it's in the air that we breathe, it's also in food. When the food is chewed completely, it's in the food, and it's in water. So all of these things bring us greater prana, meaning life force energy, which also means greater magnetism, greater charisma. People want to be around you, so you're going to be more successful when you have more prana flowing through your subtle body.
Well, and I should mention, one of the most recent books you've published is Chakras and Chakra Healing that you have featured there. And I presume there's a mention of prana in there. What are we doing different when we acknowledge that we have this prana as opposed to just breathing oxygen and nitrogen?
Well, there's many ancient spiritual practices that you can do that increase the flow of prana through your subtle body. You have this gross physical body, and then you have many layers or sheaths of a subtle body as well. And people call that the energy field or the auric field. And in India, they call it panchakosha, meaning 5 sheaths. And the physical body is one of those sheaths. Then there's the vital energy body, which is called the pranamaya kosha, and the mental emotional body called the manomaya kosha, and then the intellect and ego body, meaning the vijnanamaya kosha, and then the causal body, which is Anandamaya kosha. And then there are higher bodies as well, the I am body and so on.
Well, I guess I'm curious, so what can we do differently knowing that this is prana as opposed to just breathing? People know how to breathe deeply to calm themselves. This almost sounds like, it sounds mystical, but I understand life is mystical. We have this connection to the other world, to other realms. So how can we tap into that to boost these benefits?
Oh, that's a great question. So the thing is that prana can be increased many different ways. As I said, it's in all these various things around us. So bathing, for example, increases prana. Swimming, exercise, light exercise, that is, not overexertion, increases prana. Pranayama, meaning specific breathing exercises that are taught in the ancient scriptures of India, pranayama. And meditation increases the flow of prana. Also what they call the asanas or yogic postures, and also the bandhas or muscular locks, and mudras or specific gestures. So these are various ways, and there are many more ways that I talk about in my books, and specifically in this book, the big book of chakras and chakra healing.
I'm curious, what kind of intentions do you set in the morning with regards to your chakras to increase your prosperity and well-being?
Well, what I do on a daily basis is that I meditate. And also I use affirmations. Affirmations are very powerful, and they change your entire energy instantly, and they increase the flow of prana as well if it's affirmations that are about creating greater energy or affirming health and well-being. And these kinds of affirmations are incredibly powerful for increasing the flow of prana through your subtle body.
Okay, so do you have an example of an affirmation you might use or might have used this morning?
Yes, one that I use on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And this one is really powerful, especially if you feel like you're an energy sponge, if you feel that people are around you are draining you, if you feel that you go through your day and people are like vampires sucking you dry, that type of thing. But anybody who feels like they're being drained. So this is how it goes. I am in control. I am one with God. I am the only authority in my life. I am divinely protected by the light of my being. I close off my aura and body of light to the lower astral levels of mind, and I open to the spiritual world. Thank you, God, and so it is.
I love that, because the more we do that, the more we understand that we understand our sovereignty, and that nobody can really do anything without our participation. And this keeps us from participating in the energy drain. Isn't that right?
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Okay. So you hung around with a guru for a number of years who actually mentored the Beatles and Deepak Chopra, and I imagine he mentored you as well. What was that like being with Maharishi Mahesh?
Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was the happiest person I ever met.
Mm.
He was always bubbly and giggling, and in fact, the press dubbed him the giggling guru.
Uh-huh.
And his smile and his laughter was infectious. Everyone around him felt like they were being energized, and many people would feel, especially I would feel, waves of bliss, waves of love coming from him all the time, exuding from him, that we would receive through osmosis. And those of us who were on his staff, we wanted to always be near him. So there was a lot of competition. We would compete all the time to try to get into his room and be close to him. So It was a very intense atmosphere. And meanwhile, he was trying to change us. He was trying to improve us, all of us disciples, because that's his job. He's the guru. He said that he's like the carpenter and we are like blocks of wood. So if you're a block of wood and a carpenter is working on you, carving you, that's a very uncomfortable experience. So I called it open ego surgery that he would do on us on a daily basis. So it's traditional in India for the guru to basically work on the disciple's ego so that the ego disappears and so God can enter.
Well, that's part of the process. You submitted yourself to that. You were a willing participant, obviously, and you knew whenever you felt uncomfortable, it was because your ego was ruling a bit.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, he was the father of Transcendental Meditation. Can you explain what is particular or special about that form of meditation?
Yes, I practiced Transcendental Meditation for over 2 decades. It is a specific kind of meditation that uses a mantra, and a mantra is a Sanskrit word or group of words. And in that method of meditation, it's done sitting down, closing your eyes, getting quiet, and repeating this mantra faintly. And that takes you into deeper and deeper levels of consciousness until you experience that state of transcendental consciousness, otherwise known as Samadhi. Samadhi means evenness of mind and stillness of body. So it takes you into that transcendental state of wholeness, of oneness, of unbounded awareness, a very blissful state and very deeply relaxed state of consciousness.
So that must be interesting to people who just start out doing meditation for stress relief. but then they achieve Samadhi. And what happens to a person there?
They feel very relaxed. They feel like they are awake yet asleep at the same time. In other words, a state of restful alertness. It's
Sure.
very good for the mind, the body, the emotions. There's been a lot of scientific research done on it that shows that it reduces stress, reduces hypertension, and it's really very good for well-being and intelligence, greater intelligence as well.
Well, and there's people who come to this from a practical background, and they say they just want stress relief, and they've heard great things. But one of the benefits that those of us who are spiritual know is that it connects you more to the divine. Have you seen people become spiritual participating in this meditation?
Yes, people are naturally drawn towards meditation for many different reasons,
Mm-hmm.
but it does increase our spiritual awareness. Any form of meditation will do that.
How do you define spirituality?
Well, I define spirituality as realizing who you really are and
Mm-hmm.
expressing your true nature and being courageous, bold in your expression of who you really are.
Yeah.
And also being kind, gentle, generous, compassionate towards other people, exuding love to people around you. These are some of the spiritual qualities. I could go on and on, but
Sure. And those things would come out authentically when you are in touch with your authentic self, your true self. Those things would be natural expressions because that's our true nature, love. And
yes.
okay, so we started there. So what's your definition of a chakra?
All right. So we were talking about prana, and
Mm-hmm.
prana flows through prana is life force energy, and that flows through a specific sheath or layer of your subtle body or auric field. So it's flowing through specific conduits of energy, and those are called nadi in India, and in China they're called meridian. You may have heard of that from Chinese medicine. Yeah. So when many of these nadi come together and form a plexus, that's called chakra. And chakra means wheel in Sanskrit.
Right.
It's a wheel because it's a hub of spiritual energy, and there are spokes of spiritual energy which are radiating from that hub.
And they're spinning.
Yes, they might be spinning as well.
Hopefully.
And there are 7 major chakra that people basically know about. The root chakra at the base of the spine, the pelvic chakra and the sacral area, the navel chakra in the area of the stomach, the heart chakra, the throat chakra, the third eye in the middle of your head, forehead, middle of your head actually, the pineal gland area, and the crown chakra above your head. Those are the 7 ones that people generally know about.
Right.
And when my publisher asked me to write a book about chakras, I decided to go back to the ancient scriptures of India, the Tantric and Vedic scriptures, and find the most authentic information I could find about the topic. So I was astonished to discover that there were 7 other chakras that are talked about in the ancient scriptures, many of which are in your head, one in the area of the back of the throat, one below the heart area. So these 7 other chakras are also discussed in great detail in my book, The Big Book of Chakras and Chakra Healing.
Okay, so this is some of that information that I saw in some of your materials that is you're bringing out that most people in the Western world certainly don't know about the chakras is included in your book. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, exactly. That's part of what I'm referring to is these additional chakras that are very much a part of the chakra system. And every one of the chakras rules the area that it is in. In other words, your subtle body is keeping your physical body alive. Prana is what gives you motion. It's what gives you heat. So when there's no prana in a corpse, if you dissect a corpse, you will not find a nadi, you'll not find prana, you'll not find a chakra. It's in your subtle body. So your subtle body is what's keeping you alive. Strange.
It's interesting because people say that and they say, well, where can we find these things? They don't exist. But it's like, well, you're not going to find love in their body either. You're not going to find, the most important things in life are invisible, right? That famous quote. So, and I always wondered as a kid, what is keeping us in motion and moving? Where we're not plugged in anywhere, but actually I found out we are, just etherically. We're plugged in through these energy systems, the chakras. And I'm starting to pronounce it better now, chakras.
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you for doing that.
But your last name is Shumsky.
Yes, my last name is Shumsky.
It's the difference, not Chomsky. Chakras, okay. So is there something you do daily to energize these chakras to invigorate your day and your life?
Yes, meditation and affirmation and prayer. Those are my main ingredients. Other people may use other methods. There are actually more than seven actually, different kinds of paths of what we call yoga, which increases pranic energy through our subtle body. Meditation and affirmation, that's just one of the different ways.
It's interesting because I know that your books definitely go back to the source. They go back to the Vedas. They go back to original information, where today, if you want to call it the New Age movement, we toss around words like Kundalini and chakras, disassociated from the roots, but your information is coming from that original wisdom. Is that correct?
Yes, because I did a lot of research when I wrote this book, and I wanted to make sure that everything I wrote in this book was something that had a source that was genuine, a source that was from ancient times, that has stood the test of time throughout the centuries.
And what about, I'm going to say the word cure. What about helping people with their illnesses? What can we do with the chakras there?
Well, it's very interesting that illness really begins in your subtle body rather than in your gross physical body.
Right.
And if a person is a medical intuitive, for example, they can see in your energy field certain dark spots or muddy spots in various areas of your subtle body and in the various chakras. And it is possible through some of the things that we talked about, such as the breathing exercises and the other, there's tons of exercises in my books, including this chakra book, help to increase the flow of pranic energy and thereby increase the brilliance of radiation of the chakras, the ability for prana to flow freely through the nadis, and that just makes you more healthy, gives you more well-being. So we want
vitality.
Yeah, and emotions and mental, our thoughts are what are determining everything about us, including physically. So it's really important what we think, what we say. It's even more important what we say and what we do, because our reality is created through our own thoughts, our own words, and our own deeds.
That is so key. And does it say anything in the Vedas about creating our own reality to that degree?
Yes, in the Vedic scriptures, definitely. And for example, Lord Buddha, in the very first verse of the first chapter of the Dhammapada, he says, all that we are is a result of what we have thought. If a person speaks or acts with a pure thought, then happiness follows him or her. If a person speaks or acts with an impure thought, then unhappiness follows him or her. So Lord Buddha is describing in that great scripture, the Dhammapada, which the entire religion of Buddhism is based upon the Dhammapada. In the very first verse, he's telling us that we're creating our own destiny and our own reality through every thought, every word, and every deed. And Jesus said the same thing. He said that a person is not defiled by what they put into their mouth, but by what comes out of their mouth. And Jesus said so many times that we're creating our reality through our thoughts, our words, and our deeds.
Now, it's been said, you brought up Jesus, it's been said that, what he came into the world with was so foreign to the people there. And it's been said, and shown that he traveled through those lost years that aren't covered in the Bible through the East. What is, did you do any research in that area?
Yes.
What do
There's
you
a
want to share about
scripture, actually you can find it on the internet. It's called The Life of Saint Isa, I-S-S-A. Maybe Isa, I'm not sure how it's pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
But that scripture was found in a monastery in Leh, L-E-H, in the Himalayas, in Ladakh, in the Himalayas.
Okay.
And that scripture was found in the late 1800s, and it was published in that book. And you can read the whole book on the internet. And that book is all about the lost years of Jesus, because that manuscript was found in that monastery in that area of India. So it tells you about all the places he visited and how he preached and what he did. It's very interesting.
So they don't talk about Jesus meditating necessarily. They talk about him praying in the Bible, but it seems like a lot of what he did was meditative.
Absolutely. And, you know, I mean, he learned the various superpowers that he was able to do. He learned that in India. He learned it from the Siddhas of India.
Did he do yoga?
He must have, yes. Do yoga. I don't know what people mean by do yoga. Yoga is really not something that you do. It's an experience that you have, because as Scott was saying, we were talking before we got on the air, Scott was saying that the root of the word yoga is yuj, and that means to yoke or to unite. So it's union, is the word yoga means union, and it is union of the individual spirit with universal spirit. That's what yoga means. So it's actually a state of consciousness rather than something that you do.
You know, and I'll back that up because when I started doing yoga about 6 or 7 years ago, I was doing it very regularly back then, and I found that after 6 weeks of doing it, something came over me. It was an experience that it's like I feel like I downshifted in a pleasant way, where things didn't bother me as much. And there were things in my life at that time that were, you know, I would get bothered by, and they didn't bother me as much at that time. And I remember thinking to myself, yoga meditates you. It's like if you do nothing else but you just do yoga, changes happen. Chill people don't do yoga. Yoga chills people is what I've found.
That's good.
Yeah. So, okay, now you've also written specifically about the sixth chakra, that other book behind you there, Third Eye Meditations. Is that one of your favorites? And do you you tell us how that's expanded your life working with your sixth chakra?
Yes, the sixth chakra, which is the chakra in the middle of your head, in the area of the pineal gland. Mm-hmm. That is the seat of illumination. It is the place from where clairvoyance, clairaudience, and clairsentience comes from that. Clairvoyance meaning clear seeing things that are hidden from view. Clairaudience, hearing things that, not voices around you, hearing things within. And also receiving messages through thoughts, words that are fed into your mind. And then also clairsentience, which is clear feeling, which is the most common of the, you might call them superpowers or subtle sensory perception. I don't like to call them extrasensory perception, because that implies that we can experience something without the senses. But everything that we experience is experienced with the senses, either subtle senses or gross senses. And by the way, those senses are not in our physical body.
So the subtle senses, that's very interesting to emphasize that. We have senses we can, what are some of those subtle senses? Is that what you were referring to?
Clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, clairgustance, yeah.
Gotcha, okay. And so you don't like to consider them extrasensory because they're very much a part of us.
They're very much a part of our senses, and our senses are in our subtle body, in the area called Manomaya Kosha, which is the mental body, mental emotional body.
Okay.
And I'll demonstrate that with just a little picture illustration. And that is when a person has a near-death experience, often they describe that they catapult out of their body, and maybe they're up on the ceiling and they're watching themselves being resuscitated by the doctors, and they're hearing the doctors and they're seeing the doctors, and people are rushing around trying to use a defibrillator and all that. So what is seeing? It's not the eyes of the person who's lying on the gurney. The person is up on the ceiling watching its own body. So
Now,
the senses are in our manomaya kosha. They're not in our physical body.
Now, is another way of saying that we're just sort of tapping into the field around us, becoming one with that, and simply viewing from that perspective as if we were in a body?
No, we actually have a mental body. And the mental body is where our subtle senses are.
Okay.
And at death, that mental body leaves the physical body.
Okay. All right. Now, Kundalini is something a lot of people are talking about. Yeah. They want to experience it. It sounds like just a riveting experience. And a lot of millennials in particular, they say they value experience over anything else. And maybe that sounds like a pretty good thing. Yeah.
That's good.
So is Kundalini, should they go out and attend a Kundalini class, or is there a concern that it's too disassociated from its grounding in what it's rooted in as far as the wisdom of it? What do you recommend people pursue in that regard, and what benefits can they get from activating their Kundalini?
Yeah, so let's define what Kundalini is first. Kundal means curled up. So it's this curled up or coiled up energy. Mm-hmm. And in average individuals, it's asleep. It's like a sleeping serpent. They often call it the serpent power, because a serpent sleeps coiled up. Okay. So it's coiled up below the root chakra in the base of your spine. And in average individuals, it is asleep. But anyone who's done any spiritual practices, or actually anybody who's interested in any higher aspiration, who has intellectual pursuits, spiritual pursuits, any kind of pursuits that are not entirely based on earthly things, mm-hmm. that person's Kundalini has awakened to some degree. Mm. What do we mean by Kundalini awakening? Well, it's a form of pranic energy, first of all. Kundalini is a specific kind of life force energy. It's a spiritual energy. Mm. And when it is awakened, it flows up through a specific nadi that goes through the midline of your body. It flows up all the way from the base of the spine up to the top of the head. And it flows through a nadi called Sushumna nadi, a specific pathway.
Okay.
And as it's going up through the spine, it is awakening your chakras, making them brighter, more alive, more awake, and also awakening those superpowers that are associated with the various chakras as it's going up the spine. And then as it reaches the top of the head, you are fully awakened. You have experienced divine union. You've experienced then the goal of spiritual enlightenment. So yes, it's a good idea to study with a qualified teacher of Kundalini yoga if you're going to use that as a specific pathway for attaining higher consciousness. But it's not the only pathway. There's many ways to do that. There's many ways to awaken Kundalini also, not just through the obvious ways of doing some physical exercises or the pranayama, the breathing exercises, or the bandhas or the mudras, but also meditation, also good deeds, selfless service. Another way is devotion to God, also through discernment and discrimination. These are all various paths to awakening Kundalini.
So if you're awakening your Kundalini through doing good deeds, let's say you're performing charitable, or you're donating your time, charitable service, are you in a state of Kundalini? I mean, what is that state you're talking about? Is it constantly going up and down, and you're just sort of in this blissful floating state, or what is that?
Okay, well, you may not always be floating and blissful when your Kundalini is awakened. It's important for people to realize that this is not some kind of magic pill and that we're going to be in fairyland or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's important to realize that every human being has a lot of challenges. But as you were describing, Scott, you noticed that when you did yogic practices, that you suddenly found that things weren't bothering you as much as they were before. You were able to handle your challenges better.
Yes.
And that's what people are going to find when they practice yogic practices. And when I say practice yogic practices, that's a big statement. There's so many different paths of yoga, including, as you mentioned, selfless service, which is called karma yoga. And there's so many other practices. So through any of these practices, we can expand our awareness, and by expanding our awareness, we're not bothered by things as much anymore. We're integrated in ourself, because yoga means integration. The word yoga means integration. So when you're in a state of integration, you're in a state of equanimity, a state of wholeness. So you're feeling stronger internally, and external things don't bother you as much.
Right. Because you realize those things don't matter as much as we used to think they did. It really doesn't. It's just what's inside. And also, you're not deriving any power from things outside of yourself, so that thing can't bother you, can't have any sway over you, which is a more peaceful way to live.
It is, yeah. You find more inner peace, definitely.
I guess I want to sort of close with asking you about what sense of empowerment, or how can people be empowered by working with their chakras? What I'm saying? What can they do, or what can they expect in that way, going out into the world and being powerful, keeping their energy here, not being affected by things outside of themselves? What practical steps can they take to accomplish that?
Well, as I said, I do suggest many different kinds of practices in my books. The Big Book of Chakras and Chakra Healing has many traditional yogic practices in it. Anything from the microcosmic orbit that's in the actually I think that's in one of my other books, I have another book called Awaken Your Third Eye. But in the Chakras book, specifically, they're yogic practices from India, such things as the asanas, the yoga postures, the yoga breathing, the yoga bandhas, which are muscular locks, and also the mudras, which are specific gestures to do. So practical methods for people to use in everyday life to increase prana flowing through their subtle body. And then also Third Eye Meditations, another book that I have, is filled with guided meditations that will bring you to higher consciousness. The whole book consists of guided meditations, prayers, affirmations, and mantras that can help you to develop higher consciousness. You can do that through either reading the book, or even better, recording some of the meditations onto your device, and then getting comfortable in a chair and starting to play back what you've recorded in your own voice, and allow your own voice to guide you into deep meditation. Also, that particular book, Third Eye Meditations, is available as an audio book. And the Chakras book is being recorded now. It's going to be coming out as an audio book as well.
Oh, good.
So the audio book really helps you to do the guided meditations, because it's what I call the do nothing program. You just sit there and you'll be instructed step by step going through the meditation.
I wanted to go back and call out the pranayama that you mentioned as one of those things to do to invigorate you. And I'm sure in your book, you probably lead people through the different exercises when you close this nostril, breathe through, then close the other one.
Yeah.
And the different kinds of breathing.
Right.
A place I went to that did that, we do that for 20, 25 minutes, different exercises, and then chant Om. And when the lights got dimmed for about another 20 minutes, nobody wanted to leave afterwards. Everyone was so blissed out.
Yeah. Right.
It's so pleasurable. I mean, there are pleasurable aspects of all this, right?
Ecstatic, actually. Not just pleasurable. I'd call it blissful or ecstatic. When you are in that state of divine union, that state of yoga, which is a state of consciousness, you are feeling very blissful. You're feeling expanded. You're feeling an experience of oneness and wholeness. It is more than pleasurable. It is really the best fun you can have with your clothes on. What can I say?
Well, let's end with that. That sounds good.
Okay.
So, Susan, where can they go? What's your website?
drsusan.org, drsusan.org. And also, please go to divinetravels.com. That's DIVINETRAVELS. That's Divine Travels, plural on the travels.com.
Divine Travels, that sounds like inner journeys, right?
No, those are journeys on to sacred destinations and also cruise ship holistic conferences at sea. We have several of them coming up.
Oh, well, there you go. And depending on when people watch this, they just have to go to your website to see what the latest ones are.
Exactly.
To travel with you and have inner journeys on these outer journeys.
Yeah, not just with me, with many very famous speakers, holistic speakers that we have on our cruises.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Dr. Susan, thank you for being here and for doing this interview. It's been very illuminating.
And thank you, Scott. Thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed speaking with you.
Me too. All right. And thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.